Hi everyone. I'm Dr. D'Souza. I'm just wondering, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with today's cattle over coffee. Um, I am Dr. D'Souza. I am a beef scientist. I'm located in Raymond, Mississippi, so just south of Jackson. I'm part of the Central Mississippi Research and Extension Center, so we cover the central region of the state, all the way down to the southwest portion of the state. And then I'm also a research scientist at Brownlow Branch Experiment Station, which is one of the Mayface experiment stations. We do beef cattle and row crop research. So, without much ado, today I'm going to talk about heifer development. So, before we, jump into it, let's talk about what's going on. I'm really fortunate to go to talk right after Dr. Maples because he does a really good job of talking about what the beef industry is at. And so, if you want to look at where the beef industry is at. So, if you want to view his presentation, then send a message in the chat or send us an email, and we can definitely send you the link to his YouTube. It's already on our extension YouTube, so you can see that from yesterday. I'm sorry, from last week. Oh my gosh, this coffee is not hit yet. And so this weekend I was going grocery shopping and I bought a pound of ground beef and it cost me, $10. And that's pretty expensive. I mean, I'm sure we all remember a day when we didn't spend $10 on a pound of ground beef that was 85.15 and you're like, is it really even worth it? And so it begs the question of like, what is going on? Why are these prices where they're at? Well, I will say that, the beef industry is at its peak efficiency right now. We are producing the most amount of beef ever with the least amount of animals, and that's really great. But if we look over here, we can see that our total cattle inventory is at an all-time low right here. We're in 2026. So it's at a pretty decent low. When we look at how many cattle are moving from the feedlots to the slaughterhouses, 2026 is averaging way below um, 2025, so last year, as well as the last 5 years. So we just don't have a lot of cattle going to the slaughterhouse. And if we know anything about open markets, right, if there's a lot of demand and a little bit of supply, then the price is going to rise. What is contributing to those low number of animals going to the packing plant? It's making me, spend so much money on my beef. Well, we're at our smallest beef herd ever, right? So this chart here tracks the last 60 years of our cattle inventory in the United States. And right now in 2026, as of January 30th, we're at the lowest number of the lowest number of cows, calves, bulls, you name it, in the United States ever. So we're just not at a spot that we have a lot of animals around. When we break that down into our beef cows, again, we are our smallest beef cow herd in the last 30 years. And so we just don't have a lot of animals. And now you might say, okay, well, we still have 27.6 million head of cows here in the United States this year. Do we think those cows can bring us out of this really small herd size, start growing our herd, and start expanding the beef industry in terms of number of head count? So let's do some beef cow napkin math. And this is not exact. Please do not take this slide and say this is what Dr. D'Souza predicted. I am not predicting it. We're just doing napkin math. So we have 27.6 million head of beef cows, mature animals in the United States. Let's say optimistically 68% of those beef cows calve this year. That produces us about 18.8 million calves. And that's a pretty good number, right? That's a lot of calves. And that could increase the number of animals that, go to the feedlots and become beef and things like that. Well, I'm going to take 25% of those away. So 25% of those 18.8 million calves get held back to be developed into reproducing bulls or into developed heifers or replacement animals. And so they're not going to the feedlot, right? And so then that leaves us about 14.1 million calves that could go to the feedlot and become beef, right? Well, that's also probably not true. Calves die between the time that they are born and then I don't know what happens, but they always have some way of dying. And so let's say that 10% of the calves calf crop from this year dies. And so that produces us 12.7 million calves. And so if we go back to that first chart that we looked at, and we say, okay, we're at 86 million head right now in the feedlot, in our cattle inventory, sorry. And if we add about 12 million head of calves, then bingo, right? We have solved the problem. We have, uh, no longer we're in a herd shrinkage. We have no animals. We have a lot of animals to go to the feedlot. Well, that's not true. And we all know that in this call, right? Calves born this year have to go take about a year and a half to make it to the feedlot. And then they take about 2 to 2.5 years to go from birth to your counter, right? And so it takes a long time. And that 12 million calves that are, hypothetically born this year aren't going to show up in the beef industry until 2 years from now. And so Dr. Maples talked really a lot about that in his talk and his cattle over coffee. He talked about how, 2027 is predicted to also have a shortage of animals. And probably by 2028, we might be seeing some expansion in the beef herd. And so he also talked about the cattle cycle, and the cattle cycle is very important to understand. It takes about 10 years, right, for us to go from high cattle numbers to high cattle prices and the inverse relationships between those. And if we look at past expansion periods, we can see that when we are having increasing numbers of animals being slaughtered at the feedlot, at the slaughterhouse, we actually have a inverse relationship to the number of heifers, right? So people are keeping those heifers back, they're developing them, and that is what causes our beef herd to expand. So when we look at where we're at right now, we're here in 2026, right? What we can say is that compared to 2025, we kept about 1% back of our heifers to develop as beef cow replacements. So we're on the path, right, of beef herd expansion, hopefully, but we're not going to be there. And so today I want to talk about where we're at, right? And so you might be on this call, you might be wondering, well, do I want to develop my heifers or do I want to send them to the feedlot? Before we get into all of the technical things, I want you to take a second and think about it. You could have a developed heifer and you can send her to the feedlot, or you could have a weaned heifer. You could send her to the feedlot. She becomes beef, right? She becomes about 800 pounds of beef, and that's great. Or you could keep her, you could develop her. She could have a calf for the next 8 to 10 years, depending on how you take care of your cows and the average longevity. And 8 times 800 is then 6,400 pounds of beef. And so the way that we're going to, stop paying so much at the counter is to go ahead and increase our herd by keeping our heifers back, not sending them to the feedlot. And so we have to talk about to buy or not to buy. And we have Hamlet here, right? He's here to debate it. So we can either purchase bred heifers or we can raise our own in a way to increase our herd size. There are lots of pros to purchasing bred heifers. There's less labor, right? You don't have to do anything. You just make it to the sale barn or to the sale to buy your animals, and you sit in your chair and you bid on your animals and then you buy them. So a lot less labor. You have instant results, right? If your goal was to increase your herd size or increase the number of head on your operation, buying bred heifers does that instantaneously, right? And then you advance the genetics at your operation, right? And that's definitely a pro, especially if you're looking to change some things up in your cows or how they're performing or things like that. So purchasing bred heifers is really great. There are some cons, right? It's currently really expensive. And so here at Brown Loam, we're looking to buy some bred heifers. And I sit there and I look at every single sale and I'm like, okay, these are really good cows. And then I look at the price that they're going out for at the auction. I'm like, that's not a really good price. That's not something we can afford. And so I'm sure like a lot of us, we can't buy a bred heifer at this moment. It's very expensive. And we'd have to sell probably 2 or 3 cows to just get one heifer. And so it's a really hard value proposition for us right now to buy bred heifers. The other con is that there's a lot of unknowns, right? You don't really know the vaccination status of that animal. You don't know their temperament. You don't know their management style at their home range. You don't know what their home pasture might have looked like, or what they would have come in contact with. You might not know their genetic makeup if they're commercial bred heifers. You might not know who they're bred to, right? If you are buying a commercial bred heifer who was naturally serviced, there's a big question mark on the genetic potential of that calf, right? And so there's a lot of unknowns in purchasing bred heifers. And so I give an example of what happened here at Brown Loam. Last year we did buy some bred heifers. They came from Alabama, and we thought, wow, they look phenomenal coming off the truck. They were beautiful, slick, black, as Angus heifers look, they were great. What we didn't know is that these Angus heifers were not cut out for Mississippi. They didn't take a fancy to our forage. They didn't take a fancy to our hay. And at the end of the day, half of them ended up in our cull pen at the end of breeding season because they just didn't, adapt really well to the climate here in Mississippi. And so it was an unknown, right? It's a gamble that we took, knowing that maybe they won't work out here. And so that's one of the risks that you take when you buy bred heifers. If we talk about raising our own heifers, there are some pros, right? There's known genetics. These are the genetics of your cows that are on your operation. You know those cows do really well in your environment. You know the management practices that go into those heifer calves, right? You are the one who's managing them. You're the one who's breaking up their water, who's feeding them, who's putting out the mineral. You're the one who's running them through the chute. So you know the management practices that are going on. You know the vaccination, you know the deworming. So there's a lot of benefits there. You have reliable genetics, right? These are cows that you use year over year. You like the genetics in the production of your cows, and so there's a lot of pros there. There are cons, right, of developing your own heifers. It's a long game, right? You wean your calves in 1 year, and by the time that that calf heifer is developed and has her own calf, it's probably like 2 or 3 years later, and that is a very long time to wait. That's a lot of feed being put out. That's a lot of water to break up. That's a lot of hay to bale. There's a lot going into developing those heifers for your operation. And it's also labor intensive, right? If you don't have the time or the resources to dedicate to developing your own heifers, it could take a lot out of you. And that's, just part of it. Now, there are custom heifer development operations, right, where you can send your heifers to somewhere to do. There is obviously a price with that. And that takes out the labor aspect. But again, you're still sitting in the long game of waiting for your heifers to develop, to breed, and then to have a calf. So let's say we made the decision we're going to develop our own heifers this year. So the first question we have to ask is who gets developed, right? And so first heifers that we select should be heifers born earlier in the season. So heifers that are born earlier in the calving season are going to be heavier at weaning, right? They've had a lot of time to be with their moms. They've had a lot of time to eat grass and grow, so they're going to be heavier. We probably would like to put a little bit more resources into those animals because they're going to be probably more productive than heifers that are born later in the season. Additionally, if you are AIing your animals, your cows, then genetically you want to select the heifers that are born earlier in the season because those are the AI genetics you selected for. So we definitely want those heifers. Heifers that are easy to work with. Here at Mississippi State, Dr. Harvey and Dr. Karish do a lot of research looking at the temperament of the temperament of the dam and how that transfers to the calf. And what we know is that it's highly heritable. And so, for example, if you have a cow who, gives you the two hoof special every time you guys are working her through the chute, and by two hoof special, I mean kicks at you, runs you over, is not very easy to work with, you can guarantee that she's teaching her daughter those same behaviors. And so heifers that come out of dams like that, we don't want to keep around in our operation. They're not worth developing. They're not safe to work with. And as much as we think that their attitudes are going to change and they're going to improve, it's not going to happen, right? Sometimes our parents are really good at teaching us things that we don't ever forget, and the same thing goes for cows. Additionally, one way that you can, decide if this heifer is going to worth your time to develop would be a chute score. So chute scores are when the animal comes into your squeeze chute. You can assess their behavior. It's a 1 through 4 score. We can share that resource with you on how to do it. But essentially, a heifer that comes into your squeeze chute, you squeeze her properly. She's standing there. She lets you put an ear tag in. She lets you manipulate her, and she probably gives you maybe a minimal fight or no fight. That's when you want to develop, right? She's very calm and easy to work with. She's not a problem. There are other heifers that enter the chute and they're screaming their head off, right? And they're doing every single contortion that you've ever seen to get out of the chute. And you're like, you can't get out, my girl. That one probably not going to develop, right? She is not good in the chute. She's not easy to work with. We don't want to keep her around. The last way to assess temperament is when they're in the pasture. And so heifers that are curious about you, come up to you, and seem friendly are ones that you'd want to develop, right? They're going to have that attitude towards you for the rest of your life. I'm sorry, the rest of their life and probably your life. Um, Heifers that see you and run the other way, not worth your time. I know that we think that we can change them and things like that. It's really not worth your time or your resources to develop that heifer. We also we develop and select heifers that are with genetic traits that we would like to retain in our herd. So this goes back to if we use an AI herd, I'm sorry, an AI sire, or if we use a select bull on a certain number of animals, or our dams have certain traits that we want to retain in our herd, then we're going to go ahead and develop their daughters. And so some things that we might think about for our maternal traits that we want to keep in our herd: teat, udder, milk, right? Calving ease maternal, so that's the maternal, the mother's calving ease, genetic potential, claw, hoof, and then moms that make it really well in your environment, right? And so you are working with these cows year over year. You know, some cows are what we would call easy keepers, right? The wind could blow, and they would be fat. And so those ones, they probably have really good heifers. They have a really good conversion of resources. And so those heifers would be pretty good to pass on, and that genetic trait would be good to pass on to your next generation. There are other ways to figure out the genetic traits you'd like to retain. So there are commercial tests like the iGenity Beef, or Zoetis has a genetic test as well. I guess they're becoming one in a couple of months. And that you can test your heifers, pick out the traits that you're looking for to develop, and then the heifers that don't have desirable traits or things that you don't want to retain, you can go ahead and offload those heifers. Lastly, heifers that are structurally sound. So I don't know where all of you guys are in Mississippi, but I know where I am. And where I am, there is a valley and a crevice every 6 feet in our pastures. And that's just the way that the water runs off into a creek, is that it cuts pretty deep valleys. And so if we have heifers that are not structurally sound, they don't have good claws, they don't have good hoofs, they don't have great bone structure or genetic or structural makeup of their body, they're not going to survive out here. It's really important for a heifer to be able to ambulate around her pasture correctly, right? She needs to keep up with the herd because they're herd animals, and she really needs to keep up with the herd when predators are around, right? There's the power of the cow is in a herd, right? And so if a coyote comes in and this heifer is not structurally sound, she can't navigate the pasture as well, especially at night, she's not probably going to make it. And so we don't want to put our time and our effort in developing heifers that are not structurally sound for what we're looking for in our operation. Lastly, I have a teeny tiny one on here that says our favorite heifer, right? And so we all have one, and I'm not going to say that we don't have one. It was this calf that you had to probably bottle feed, right? And you had to like go through the trenches for it, and it's going to be just really, really hard for you to let it go to the sale barn. Fine, develop it. I'm not going to say that that one's going to be the most successful in your breeding operation, but we all do it, right? We all have one that we love a lot and we can't not. And so that's okay. Usually, when you're doing this developing heifer process, the costs are outweighed. And so eventually you might send number five off to the sale barn and she'll pay the bills for the rest of the heifer development of your animals. So what I don't have on here is numbers, right? It is up to you as a producer to decide the number of animals that you want to develop. What I can say is that let's say you think I need, 20 animals to replace beef cows. I culled out 20 cows. I want to replace those 20 cows with developed heifers. You should develop 20% more. And so if we have 20 cows, 20% more, I believe is four more heifers. So you're going to keep them and you're going to develop those ones as well. So you're going to do 24. The reason for that is because not all of those 24 are going to make it to the finish line. And so, like number five, our favorite heifer, those extra animals that you keep back to retain and develop, they can go to sale barn and pay the bills for your heifer development, especially in this market. And so, if we have a goal number in mind, then it's very good to keep a certain additional number back so that you can develop more. Okay, so what are our goals? Well, obviously, the number one goal is a pubertal heifer, right? A heifer that goes from a weaned calf into one that can be bred and reproduced for the herd. So that's our number one goal for sure in developing heifers. We want a heifer that has her first calf by 2 years old. And that means she needs to get bred at 12 to 14 months old at about 65% of her mature body weight. So this is definitely achievable for our Boss Taurus animals. So animals like our Angus, Charolais, Simmental animals, right? They're all on the under the Boss Taurus umbrella, and so that this is a definitely achievable target. Now, if you have Bos indicans influenced animals, so our Brahmas and Loris, anything that has a little bit of ear in it, well, over 75% ear in it, are going to be slower developing. And so, what our goalpost for developing our Bos indicus influenced animals is that they are being bred at 14 to 18 months old. They might be less than 65%. So I would say 55% mature body weight for our Bos indicus animals. They do just have a larger body and a larger space to grow to. So as long as they're in between that 55 to 65% and they're in that age range, they're probably pretty good to breed. We want to have heifers that calve with ease early in the season, right? And so I'm going to talk about some ways to ensure that we're calving with ease. But what we don't want is to extend our calving season by, having heifers that we have to pull and then having cows that we have to pull. And at the end of it, we're so done with this situation. So we want heifers that can calve with ease early in the season. Early in the season is really important because we want those heifers to get reconditioned. What we all know is that heifers, our second calf heifer is the hardest animal to breed at the operation. And so, well, if our first calf heifers can calve early, then they can recondition for a little bit longer of a time before we roll around again to breeding season. First, let's talk about growth and nutrition. I'm a nutritionist, so I always like to start here. Um, we have to talk about a target ADG. So, a target average daily gain is dependent on weaning and breeding dates. This is very conditional, and so I have an example here just to work it out. We have some heifers, their weaning weight is 450 pounds. We weaned them on April 15th. And on average, our mature body weight of our cow herd, is 1,100 pounds. So we want her to reach about 715 pounds by the time we breed her for the very first time. Let's say that I'm going to breed them on November 15th, right before Thanksgiving. So we have about a 265-pound spread that she has to grow, and we have about 214 days. And so if we divide the amount of weight that we have to grow divided by the number of days that we have to grow, we get about 1.24 pounds per day as our target average daily gain for our heifers. This could change if you had fall calving heifers, fall calving cows, and you said, "Hey, I want to now try spring calving." You might hold her for a year. So that's what I have in this gray box is holding that heifer for a year. When we take that change of weight and we divide it over 365 days, you can see the average daily gain is close to half less. And so it's really dependent on when you're going to breed those heifers on how hard you're going to push them to grow to that 65% mature body weight. So, as a golden rule, we like to recommend that your target average daily gain should be between 1.5 to 1.75 pounds per day over the entire growth period of the animal. Anything over 1.75, you do run a risk of over conditioning the animal too rapidly. And so, what we know is fast fat deposition in heifers lowers their milk production and their fertility. So, we don't want to do that. We will really want to stay between that 1.5 to 1.75 pounds per day. I have over the growth period underlined because I want to show you this. So we're running a development heifer trial here at Brownlow. And if we, section out the slope between June 15th and June 21st, I can tell you that this average daily gain is way more than 1.75 pounds per day, right? There's a lot of growth going on here in this one little period. But if we look at their average daily gain from April 2nd, which is when they were weaned, to June 22nd, which was yesterday, this average daily gain over time is 1.36 pounds per day, and that's perfectly okay. And so growth in calves is not linear, right? There are times where they slow down and you're like, oh my God, I'm pouring feed to them and they're not growing. And there's times where you're like, oh my gosh, they've hit a growth spurt. And so over time, we want to target that average daily gain, but if you're looking at it at a very minute lens, you might get concerned. And so, what I can always recommend is to take a step back, right? If you're weighing them frequently or you're looking at their body size, just go ahead and take a step back, look at the weaning weight, and then look at the weight today. And then that can tell you if you're on the right track or if you're being a little bit too aggressive or you're not being aggressive enough to get to your goal. Other things for growth and nutrition, you want to make sure that you have a free choice mineral out at all times. It's recommended to have a 2-to-1 mineral. So 2-to-1 is referring to the calcium to phosphorus ratio. You can go all the way up to a 4-to-1 ratio, so 4 times the amount of calcium than phosphorus. That's totally okay. The mammalian bodies, heifer bodies, are really good at regulating their calcium and phosphorus levels. And so that change in ratio is not going to do anything detrimental. You have to remember that our developing heifers are growing, right? They're baby animals that are becoming adolescent animals. Their bones are growing, their muscles are growing, and so we need to make sure that we have enough vitamins and minerals out and available for them to reach their genetic potential of growth. We need to make sure that we have a supplement out. So Mississippi forages generally, on average, are lacking a lot of energy. So our total digestible nutrients, our net energy growth nutrients are lacking in our forage base. We do a pretty good job with having a lot of protein, but we just don't have a lot of energy. And so for us to reach those target average daily gains that we talked about just 2 slides ago, we need to make sure that we have a supplement that's meeting the needs of our heifers. And so you might be like, okay, well, how do I do that? Dr. Reyes, Barbara, and Brandy and I can help you answer those questions. So just reach out to your beef extension team. We can help you figure out what supplement will work for your operation based on your goals. It's also important, when we talk about Mississippi forages, for you to do a forage test, right? So your extension agent in your county, as well as the Mississippi State forage extension team, can help you test your pastures for forage quality. I think Dr. Reyes, Barbara, is also doing a program for beef producers. And so we can assist you in getting a forage test done for your pastures or your hay, so you understand what nutrients are available for your cows before you formulate a supplement or decide if you need to supplement or anything like that. Lastly on here, I have feed additives. So feed additives may enhance the growth and development of your heifers. It's just dependent on the feed additive. If you want more information about that, please reach out to us. We're happy to talk about it. There's very limited research on heifer development and feed additives, and that gets very narrowed down when we talk about heifer conception and fertility and reproduction. And so that's a new area of of research or a developing area of research. But we can definitely have a conversation if you think you would like to incorporate a feed additive into your supplementation plan. So this research comes from Dr. Harvey at Prairie Research Unit. And here they fed three different kinds, three different target average daily gains. 0.88 pounds per day was the low, all the way up to 1.76 pounds per day for the high. And what they saw is that with an accelerated target average daily gain after weaning, puberty onset was or puberty was attained faster, is what this whole thing is saying here. And so if we are meeting the nutritional requirements of our cows and we're reaching that target ADG that we're looking for, we can almost bet on the fact that our heifers are going to come into estrus sooner. There were no differences in milk yield. I didn't include that graph because it's not important. This is just my segue into reproductive management. And so, just like I said, if the nutritional needs of our heifers are being met, our heifers should display estrus before reaching the breeding date. And so, how do heifers display estrus? And that would be by standing heat. So, in this picture here, I have some tail heads displayed, as well as if you look really closely, the Estrotech patches are on here. And so these Estrotech patches or heat detection patches are very helpful. You can stick them on the tail head of an animal. Cattle natural behavior when they come into puberty is that they will mount each other or ride each other. And so that mounting friction rubs off the Estrotech patch. It rubs off the Estrotech patch and it shows you the animals that are in standing heat. So if you're doing a development program and you're like, I don't know how to know if my heifers are in standing heat or not, 60 days before your breeding date, go ahead and put these patches on your heifers. And what you can see is them begin to rub them off. That's about 60 days is about 3 heat cycles before. And so between that, you should see patches rubbed off. Now, let's say you put those patches on your heifer 60 days before breeding date, and one heifer, she kind of has it scratched off, but not really. The Estrotech pamphlet that comes with these stickers tells you what to do in that situation. So 75%, I believe, is okay, but 50% or less is not okay. Just read the pamphlet to see what it says exactly on that. The reason I say 60 days before is because the fertility of your developed heifer increases by 20% if they display 3 estrus cycles before breeding. So 60 days is about, 3 estrus cycles before her breeding date. And so you would increase the fertility of your heifers more or less to detect the ones that are in standing heat and cycling by the time that you go into breeding season. Usually the animals that were heavier at weaning, right, are the ones that are definitely probably going to be the ones that are cycling early, right? Some of them you might pull off of their dam and 2 weeks later they're already cycling. And so that one is probably more fertile than a later calved heifer that takes a lot longer to develop and, all the things that go into that. It is a 20% increase. It's not like 100% right. And so it's not always going to be true for all operations. And you might have one heifer that, doesn't have a scratched off patch and she catches, on the first heat. You know what? She's great. Keep her around. So there is a little bit of, error and leeway in these estimations from research. Just touching back on our Boss Indicus influenced animals, they are slower maturing, right? And so they're going to take a little bit longer to get to that breed date. They might not show 3 puberty cycles before we breed them. They might show 1 or 2. Again, the patches are really what's going to help you. So to stick those patches on 60 days before, look at those patches, and then determine if those heifers are ready to breed or not. The other benefit of that 60-day period is, you have time to adjust, right? So you're looking for the first heat cycle after sticking that on. If you're seeing not a lot of heifers, having a heat cycle and not a lot of stickers being scratched off, you can adjust the nutrition of your animals, right, to reach your goals. or reach out to your beef extension team for help. Lastly, our crossbred heifers. So, Brangus, or if you Hereford and Angus or something like that, hybrid vigor exists. And so hybrid vigor does increase the fertility of your developed heifers. So we have now weaned our heifers. We have grown them to the right size, right? We have tested them. We made sure that they are, in standing heat. They are in puberty. They're cycling correctly. We've tested all of these things. So what are the last couple steps before we breed? Well, we call our veterinarian. And so we will always recommend you do this about a month before breeding season, just so that you know that you're breeding the right animals. So heifers that are in standing heat would be the ones eligible for these assessments by your veterinarian. The first assessment your veterinarian can do for you is a pelvic area measurement. So what they would do is they'll measure from the spine down to the bottom of the pelvis. They would palpate the heifer, measure from the top of the spine to the bottom of the pelvis, and then the two sides. That's going to give us a prediction of how large her pelvic opening is. That is very important, right? Because the calf has to come through that pelvic opening. And if it's not big enough, then she's probably not eligible to be bred by our target breeding date. Now, we could have really good heifers. They are in standing heat. They developed well. They're structurally sound. We have good temperament, all of those things. What we can't control is that pelvic opening, right? That's her genetic potential. And so she's just going to be a really good heifer to send to the sale barn because she doesn't really fit your operations needs. Where your veterinarian can also do reproductive tract scores. We as beef extension team can send you more information about it, but your veterinarian is the one who's trained to do it. What they'll do is they'll palpate the heifer again rectally. They'll examine the ovaries as well as the uterus and do some measurements. From there, they translate that into a score, and that tells you if that heifer is ready to be bred or not. Essentially, it's looking at the development of the reproductive tract as a whole. As that heifer is growing, right, her ovaries are developing, her uterus is developing. And so that score is very important. Heifers that are lower on the reproductive tract score from your veterinarian, you probably don't want to breed. It means that their reproductive tract is very immature. It's going to be a waste of your efforts or the bull's efforts to breed that heifer. And so you could either hold out, right? Put a little bit more feed in her, see if she develops, or take her to the sale barn. And then vaccination and parasite control. And so vaccination is very important, especially for our developed heifers. We want to make sure that they're staying healthy all of the time. Vaccination, especially in young animals, can affect the reproductive ability to catch or fertility. And so talking with your vet, making sure that you're on a good vaccination and parasite control plan will ensure that your heifers are going to get bred in time. The only thing I can really recommend for this slide is talk to your veterinarian. They are really good at knowing these things and helping you out, and so they can definitely assist you in terms of these three things on this slide. So we have now passed all the things, and you're like, okay, the last step is to pick our bull. And you're like, Dr. D'Souza, which bull do I pick for my developed heifers? There's only one trait I really super am going to talk about, and that's calving ease, right? And so I talked about it earlier for the dam, so your mama cows, but your sires also have a calving ease genetic potential. And so that's something that you want to look at. If you're doing artificial insemination, those EPDs are always available to you. If you are using a bull and you're naturally servicing, you can send off for an EPD for that bull. Or if it's a registered animal, they come with an EPD, but you want to use a calving ease bull on your developed heifers. Every single time, non-negotiable, hands down. I don't care what breed they are. I don't care how big their pelvis is. You want to use a calving ease bull. The reason for that is because the calf that's growing inside is her first calf, right? This is her first time doing everything. And the first time that she's going to be, having a calf and pushing it out. And so you don't want anything to be a struggle. You don't want to have a negative outcome. And you definitely don't want to be pulling all 20 of those calves, right? And so choosing a calving ease bull, puts the deck and stacks the deck in your favor. And so that's one thing that I look at. Now, there's a lot of other traits out there, right, of what you can look at that is dependent on your herd's goals. So if you want to keep more heifers back and choose maternal, that's fine. We can talk to you about that. If you want to go terminal, you're like, I'm not keeping any more animals for the rest of my life. I'm just going to, produce calves. That's also okay. Developed heifers need calving ease sires. End of story. I can tell it to you probably in my sleep. So now we have selected our weaned heifers. We have uh, developed them to what they need. They are in standing heat. Our veterinarian says, oh yeah, good to breed. And we bred them to a calving ease bull. The last step is, post breeding. So post breeding, we're going to go ahead and have our veterinarian check for pregnancy status, right? We don't want to keep around anyone who didn't get bred. We spent a lot of time, money, resources to develop those heifers. And so we want to call on pregnancy status. If they're open, those heifers can go to the sale barn. And as I said earlier, those heifers usually pay for your development program at the sale barn, especially right now when the cattle prices are really good. Performance. And so this is a little bit of a tighter metric. You know how much feed you gave every single heifer, and you know probably their average daily gain if you're bringing them across a scale or assessing their body condition. And so heifers that, seem to have eaten more and did not gain as much, you might not want to keep them, right? Their residual feed intake, their genetic potential to gain is probably not as high as other heifers that performed better, and so you might not want to keep them. They can be marketed right as a bred heifer if you are interested in marketing them, or you can keep them. It's up to you. It's a tighter metric to call for your animals, but it's an option for you if you're limited in resources or inputs for sure. And then the genetic potential is calf. So let's say that you did use a calving east sire, but you're like, well, it is what it is. You can always choose to either calve out that heifer and then call the calf, or you can call her as a bred heifer. So it's completely up to you. That's an economic decision that you make for your own operation. We have to ensure that we have proper nutrients for our first calf heifers. We have to remember that, we bred them at 12 to 14 months old for our Bos Taurus animals and 14 to 18 months old. That is not a mature cow, not by any means. Cows mature about 3 years old, and so they are not mature right now. So we need to make sure that we're still having enough supplement in front of them, and a lot of nutrients in front of them to encourage their growth and encourage the success of their fetus. At calving, they need to weigh 80 to 90% of their mature body weight. So they have a lot to grow between breeding at 65% for mature body weight and calving. And that's only 283 days. And so what I will say is that these developed heifers, they probably need to have a little bit of extra supplement in front of them the entire time until they have that calf and then some. Because they're growing, they're still maturing. If you're like, well, how do I know how much they need? Your beef extension team can help you. Or you know what your mature cows take, right? Need in terms of feed. Some of them just grow on grass. Well, first calf heifers need 20% more. And so if 20% more means that you're buying lick tubs and you're giving a commodity ration, then that's what 20% more is. What I will say is that I don't think that you could waste money giving supplement to your first calf heifers and your developing heifers because you want to ensure that their longevity in your herd. And so supplementing them and ensuring that they have everything they need to grow is super important. Heifers should calve at body condition score 6, and they should maintain a body condition score 6. And so making sure that you have supplement out for them is very important. Maintaining a body condition score 6 is a little bit hard after they have their first calf. So make sure you're looking at her nutrients, what's available to her, and putting out supplement. Um, First calf heifers that calve early are the ones that we're looking for, right? So they usually should calve 1 month before your mature herd. The second calf heifer is the hardest animal to breed on your operation. And so making sure that we're providing enough nutrients for those first calf heifers until their second pregnancy, and then some is very important. With that, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me. I left about 15 minutes for us to talk about questions. I have a QR code on this slides, It takes you to a Mississippi State Extension publication about replacement beef heifer development. A lot of the information I presented here today comes from this link. And so if you're looking for a resource to have at home to print out, there's your resource. But you are also more than welcome to send us an email. My contact information is here. Please send me questions if you think of something later. I'm more than happy to answer them. And with that, I will open it up to any questions from the audience.
Do you want these in the chat box or you want to be asked directly?
You can ask me right here.
Okay. Um, Generally what we do, and we're close to the Starkville area, is we will wean the heifers. We will wean all of our calves, for lack of a better word, and then we put them on feed. But most of the time that feed is a it's going to be like a free choice and a feeder and
Hmm.
stuff. And so I know I've got some calves that I want to gain all the weight they can because I'm trying to put weight on them, but also wonder how does that affect ones that I wind up keeping as a heifer in a free choice world without any limiter, or do I need to work at limiting their intake and stuff?
Yeah, so I would recommend if you want to keep them as developed heifer, you should think about adding in a limiter. So salt is a really good limiter. And the reason for that is that we don't want to overcondition our developing heifers. Overconditioning them or letting them grow a little bit too fast and having that high average daily gain puts a little bit, well, it puts a lot more fat on the animal and that can hold her back reproductively. And so if you do have heifers that you want to recondition, I would recommend feeding them separately if you have the option to, or just limiting everyone it on that supplement.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Other questions, thoughts, concerns, anything in the chat? No. Brandy is asking if everyone can go ahead and complete the poll. That just helps us track how well I did, as well as other metrics of enrollment and things like that. And Skip, I do see your comment. Skip sent me a message that says a little ear goes a long way. It is very true, especially here in Mississippi.
Hey, Doc, this is Aubrey Ashford. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You mentioned that cross breed or mixed breed cattle breeds better than, I guess, a pure breed. Why is that?
And so it's the mixing of the genes has something called hybrid vigor, and so that is just like two different kinds of gene pools coming together, and it makes either a more efficient animal. In case of reproductive fertility, it's a more fertile animal. Um, it's just I don't know how to explain that, but it's just a different inflow of genetics is what increases the vigor of the animals. Brandy or Barbara, if you're still on here, can you explain that a little bit better? Maybe they're not on here. Does that answer your question, or do you want me to clarify? I can send you an email.
Yeah, yes, I will
Okay.
like to clarify because we have a farm in Choctaw County, uh, and we're debating on what our next bull will be. Uh,
Okay.
and so we are just trying to see, do we want to go with a crossbreed Angus Brangus, or do we want a straight Angus bull? And so my dad and I are trying to make a decision what we want to do. But based on what you just gave us, we want to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck with the bull. Right.
Sure. Sure. I will